Hello test subjects, welcome back to a video about Shoichi. So, I've been a little absent, a little bit, and I wanted to make another kind of updated guide on how to play Shoichi and kind of just keep everyone in the loop on how he plays, because I know there's been a lot of people that have been asking me how to play Shoichi or make another video here and there. So, yeah, this is kind of my return video, but aside from that, we're going to be going over Shoichi's skills and then going into transitions, augments, combos, you know the gists. But yeah, let's get started. This is Shoichi's passive, Phony Deal. Whenever you deal damage with your abilities, you gain 1 stack of Phony Deal per ability. And whenever you reach max stacks, that max stack being a number of 5 abilities total, you gain a enhanced auto. And whenever you deal damage with your auto, you'll deal extra skill damage and you'll drop a dagger behind that target. So this passive ability is probably one of his most important utilities in terms of keeping up his combo and his extended fight duration. And it's super important to keep in mind, especially when you're a beginner learning this character, to keep in mind how many stacks you are, because let's say, for example, you're at 4 stacks and you don't even know and you're comboing through and you accidentally double drop a dagger. I'll explain what that means later on in the video, but it's super important to keep in mind of what this ability can do for you in terms of combat and continuation in long extended fights. Shoichi's Q, his first ability, is where Shoichi lunges his blade in a targeted direction, dealing skill damage, and whenever he hits an ability with it, it reduces its cooldown, enabling to use Bad Faith. Bad Faith increases its range, and it leaves a dagger on the ground. So, this ability is one of his best startup tools, or his kind of setup, where Good Faith, his first Q1, is relatively short ranged, but can be used for good damage, good poke, as well as setting up the rest of his kit, which again I will explain all combos and kits related to it later in the video. Shoichi's second ability, Bottom Line. Shoichi dashes to a targeted enemy or dagger, dealing skill damage to all enemies in his path. If he picks up a dagger, the cooldown of Bottom Line is reset. Now, this is Shoichi's bread and butter, his main damage outsource, and using this ability optimally is what is able to basically identify Shoichi as the assassin character, the character you want to not approach as a backliner, and is his main ability. If you have this on cooldown, it is over. You can't do anything. Shoichi's third ability, Risky Business. Shoichi takes a step back and throws a dagger to the front, dealing skill damage to enemies hit and slowing them. Enemies hit are marked with Risky Business and a dagger falls behind them. If marked enemies are hit with his daggers, they take increased damage by 25%. And every time an enemy marked with Risky Business is hit with his passive daggers, his cooldown is reduced, and if they are killed, his cooldown is reduced even more, basically enough to almost refund his ability. Now, this is his main starter ability, your ability that you kind of don't want to miss, as it provides a damage increase buff as well as your startup in starting combos. And it is really good. 25% damage, increased damage to all sources, as well as a slow that does increase per level. I believe the slow does reach up to 99%, but do keep in mind the slow is like a 0.1 second, so it's almost insignificant, but it's still very important, especially with Shoichi's W comboing with it very nicely. Shoichi's fourth ability, or his ultimate, Ruthless. Shoichi swings his deadly briefcase, dealing skill damage to enemies around him, reducing their movement speed, and tossing 4 daggers to the ground in a square, or cross, depending on how you look at it. Daggers pierce the enemy and deal skill damage. Now, what this description does not tell you is that it is more of a cross, depending on how you look at it, but it also has a few key twinks to it. So like, for example, if you ult next to the wall, the dagger closest to the wall will drop on top of you, not across the wall. So that's something you got to keep in mind, as well as the slow actually does a pretty decent amount for slowing. I believe it's around 60-50% slow. And that is pretty significant, especially when you're ulting and trying to keep enemies locked down, or at least within your W range when you use your ultimate. Alright, so now that we've gone over Shoichi's kit, we can talk about some of his basic combos. So the thing is with Shoichi is, there's so many different varieties on how to combo with Shoichi that there isn't really a set in stone combo that everyone can use. There's always going to be a different situation, different niche that Shoichi can do to optimize his damage. So we're going to go from 3 different tiers. We're going to go from basic, medium, and advanced combos that you can do in training, just to practice and get that little feel of kind of what you want to start with, what you want to do while you're playing the game. So here we have Shoichi's basic combo, which unironically is 15 buttons to press consecutively, but it's a lot less intimidating when you start getting used to it and when you see it and practice it in slow motion. But this is going to be your bread and butter kind of starter combo, something you're going to want to practice and take 15 minutes every day when you're playing this game. Not every day, but whenever you play this game, head into training, practice this basic combo for about maybe 15 minutes before hopping into a game. So here is the medium combo. Medium combo is more complex, adding the passive auto into the middle of the combo, giving you that extra W reset, in turn giving you more damage. This is mainly for more security against tanks, bruisers, or that extra kind of oomph you need to kill that 1 HP ADC or mage that has that really good escape. For example, Katia, Justina, even new Min. But also keep in mind, these combos are somewhat inconsistent in-game, as you have to factor in the player aspect and the escapes that these characters have. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't practice this combo or any of these combos. In fact, I highly encourage it, as you still need this basis on how you want to enter in fights and how you want to kill these targets with these combos. So this is the second to last combo I'll show you. The next combo after this one will involve the D skill, but this one's kind of like the step up before you even hit that last step. So this one I recommend you practice before you even apply the D skill application, which I'll show you in the next combo after this one. But some applications that you can use for this one is mainly just an extension combo for long extended fights, as well as to add a little bit more oomph to your combinations, as well as a little bit more flair and variety in terms of how you want to target enemy players, as well as finishing off targets. Alright, so this is going to be our last combo that we're going to talk about today, which it's basically very similar to the advanced combo, but it's just the application of D skill. Now, this is going to be kind of like your main combo once you learn everything else previous to this. All the other combos are basically just one step at a time leading up to this final combo, which is probably going to be your main combo for a while until they rework the character or something happens to him. So the applications that you can use for this one is going to be quite literally everything. D skill is such an important skill on Shoichi that it gives him safety, it gives him escape, it gives him engage. Now, D skill also does have a proc to it. When you activate it again, it does teleport you behind the target while also slowing them, which is really good for setting up certain combos on Shoichi, especially that slow and the auto reset. So like, for example, if you have your passive auto, you can, but you don't have your W reset, you can proc your D2 and it'll teleport you behind the target where you autoed, and it'll give you that W reset, which is really nice. We're going to be talking about Shoichi tips now. So, as I said earlier, his abilities and the way he works in-game is a little bit different than what people can lead on, or just reading his abilities off of the character menu screen. And this is going to be some tips that you may not have known, but some people may have known, but just in case, we're going to go over a few things. The first thing we're going to go over is wall Shoichis. So what I mean is, with Shoichi and wall interactions, there's a few things that can happen with his Q2 and his ultimate. Starting with his Q2 is able to throw a dagger over a wall if it's thin enough, giving Shoichi a small little wall hop. Like, for example, if someone were to hop over the wall and you place a camera on the side and your Q2 is up, you're able to throw your Q2 over the wall and dash past that wall, which is pretty cool. For your ultimate though, your ultimate does not go through walls. In fact, if you go against any wall, the dagger closest to that wall will drop on top of you, which is really good and also really bad depending on the type of wall. For example, the walls in Forest are really rigid and have weird interactions, and sometimes when you throw your dagger or throw your ultimate, two of them will land on top of you and you'll lose a lot of damage output that way. But let's say, for example, you raw W onto a enemy that's next to a wall and you ult on top of them, your dagger will drop on top of you, giving you that dagger reset, which is really good for certain combos. So we're gonna move on to the next tip that we got in store for you guys, is going to be Shoichi inner E interactions. So with his E, there's a few things you can do. You can animation cancel with your tactical skill or your W skill. You can also theoretically use your ultimate as well, but it's kind of finicky with how that works, so we're just going to stick with the main two. So, E animation with W, you can cancel on the immediate startup when the dagger gets released from his E to press W, which then immediately cancels the knockback, which is really good for comboing, as well as kind of just doing some setup dodging as well. With his tactical skill, you can use a couple of tactical skills that kind of work really well. Blink being the main one, is where you can actually press E and then flash at the same time, bringing you closer to your dagger with your E dagger. So let's say, for example, you don't have your W but you have blink and E, you hit your E, you can flash immediately the second you press the E button, and you're like within walking distance of your dagger, which gives you that W reset. Of course, there's going to be some issues, but there are like scenarios where this is really useful. Alright, so we're going to move on to the last tip we have for Shoichi, and that's going to be talking about his ultimate animation. And now, a lot of people see his ultimate as a self-stun and just a really shit ability to use sometimes, but it does have its upside. So like, for example, you can use the animation to your advantage, for example, canceling out fears from Hyejin or Aya. If you time your ultimate correctly, you can actually use the animation to completely cancel out the fear duration. Now, you do have to time this really carefully, but it's not that hard to do, and also it's a really nice niche because you get to stay in the center and you don't get feared, and it allows you to have that positioning over, let's say, Aya, right? She dashes away when you're feared, but by the time your animation is done, your fear is gone, and you're able to continue your combo. So whenever you're fighting an Aya or a Hyejin, kind of keep that in mind, and it might be like a fun little niche you can kind of play off. Alright, so now that we've gotten pretty much everything I want to get rid of, talk about first thing before we get to this area, we're going to start talking about augments and builds. So this segment's going to be a little bit shorter just because of the way how Eternal Return works. Meta is going to change, routes are going to change, everything's going to really change. Like, for Shoichi, you're going to have his main augments, obviously. You're going to have Vampiric, and maybe Ironclad. But that's like kind of like a more secret tech. Not a lot of people go for it. Vampiric's gonna be your main go-to, and that hasn't really changed since season 1, really much. Since Augments came out and all that. Yeah, Vampiric has been his go-to augment from the very beginning. There are some little kind of tidbits here and there in terms of sug augments. Like, for example, instead of going Anima Reaper, you can go Carnivore. I personally like going Carnivore because Carnivore has that burst healing, as well as the fact that you can just kill an animal, grab its meat, and you have 750 food. It's really good. Other than sub augments and Vampiric builds, there are currently 2 builds I go with that I run. There are also the meta builds that you can find just from searching on search builds, but these 2 are pretty much what I like to run. You're gonna have the one that starts hospital going into cemetery, and you have one that is very old school, and it sometimes works, but with the current meta, it is very contested. It starts dock going into chapel and ends in stream. This route is more for kind of the alternate route or emergency route. Like, let's say, for example, hospital and cemetery are super contested and you're not going to be able to get anything, so you would want to go this route. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend going this route as your main route, but you can. It's up to you. I'll put the codes up. They're constantly updated, changing. So if you guys want to kind of play around with it, make your own build based off of my build, go for it. I encourage it. Alright, so we're going to be talking about 2 augments. One is going to be the Vampiric Bloodline page, and the second one is going to be Ironclad. So Vampiric is going to be your most used, if not your only used augment page. Obviously, you can mix it up here and there with the sub augments, but this is like pretty much your go-to. For your sub augments, you're gonna go red and blue tree. For the red tree, you have Frenzy, and I run Carnivore, but some people run Anima Reaper for the extra damage and AP. I personally don't see any use in the extra 8 AP it gives you, but it's extra damage and free damage pretty much just for farming bears or killing enemy test subjects. But other than that, it's pretty good. For your blue tree, you're gonna go Unwavering Mentality and Cavalcade. You can switch to the Tenacity rune if you feel like you're playing more with your team, but 9 out of the 10 times you're gonna be basically in the backline by yourself, killing their backline. So Cavalcade's really nice for when you're just by yourself, and it's a pretty small radius too, so it doesn't really count towards your team if they're like decently close to you. Like, it's actually a pretty good radius for the damage reduction to take effect. So it's really good, especially when you're ulting and you're just taking free damage. It's super nice. For the second augment page we're talking about, it's going to be Ironclad. It's going to be the same blue-red tree, except for the red sub-augments, you're going to go into Contempt for the Weak and then Carnivore. I personally don't see any value in going Frenzy if you're not running Vampiric, because yes, it gives you some Omni Siphon, but it's not enough to keep you alive or do anything of the fact. So going for Contempt for the week just gives you that extra execute damage, as well as just like it's just a useful sub augment page, especially if you're going for Ironclad, which is more of a defensive augment. You want to pick Ironclad for these really tough matchups like heavy CC lobbies. And the way you want to play Ironclad is significantly different to Vampiric. So with Ironclad, you want to be more defensive, and you want to use your D skill as a parry almost. Like for example, you're getting CC'd or you're going to take heavy damage, press D skill, and that just reduces that by a metric ton, and is really good, especially for the tenacity as well. Okay, so we're gonna move on to transitions now. For our first set of transitions is going to be Courtier, Turban, Pharaoh, Killer Heels, and Eclipse. Now this transition is going to be more situational based, but is going to be really good in terms of just raw amp, and as well as just a really good build transition for late game damage, high scaling, as well as the Courtier passive being able to increase your Omni Siphon at max stats and just giving you more damage overall. Pharaoh is there to kind of fill in that cheap percent amp, and Killer Heels got a recent revert, now giving you a non-unique increase in skill amp percentage. So it's still a really good item for a last transition force core item. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's definitely really solid if you want to run Turban. Eclipse is there, it is really good, but obviously it's not your very first transition. Its passive got a nice little buff to where whenever you do proc it, it gives you attack speed, which is really nice for hitting that W auto cancel. It's really good for giving you that little extra oomph as well in that auto. The next set of transitions is going to be my personal favorite, one that I run mainly. It's going to be resulting in Courtier, Malice, Persona, Glacials, and Nightmare Nails. Now, this one is kind of my go-to. It's what I personally go every time. Courtier, again, really good passive, just overall good stats. Malice is the highest AP scaling in terms of daggers, as well as its passive giving you that extra 40% extra damage when they're below half HP, or I think 40% HP, which works really well with Contempt for the Weak, basically double stacking that passive on one, giving you huge execution damage basically. Persona is really good as it gives you that nice big boost in percent amp, as well as nice little SP and movement speed as well. Glacials is just a nice cheap item for cooldown reduction, as well as Nightmare Nails for the anti-heal. Our third set of transition is going to be very similar to our second one, but it's going to change a couple of items. So instead of having Glacials, we're going to be running Windwalkers. Instead of Nightmare Nails, we're going to be running Pharaohs. And instead of Persona, it'll be Cyberstalker. The reason why I have these in here is just for more of a diverse playstyle, as well as giving you a little bit of tankiness, as well as still having that same output of damage that you would have. The amp is obviously going to be a slightly lower, as you don't really have that big boost from amp percentage that Persona gives you, but this does in return give you a little bit more tankiness, as well as that nice little focus on your passive damage with Cyberstalker buffing it, as well as all your other autos when you stack up its passive. Our last main transitions is going to be incredibly budget based. It's going to be your cheap, quick, you're super behind type of transition, as we're going to be running Cabana, Glacials, Tindalos, Persona, and Eclipse. Now, you're running basically 2 Meteors, 1 Tree, a Mithril, and 1 Force Core, instead of your usual 2 Force Core, 2 Mithril, or whatever ability you decide to go. where this one is super budget. It's when you're really behind and your team just can't catch a break and you're just running everywhere, you have no point, right? With Cabana is still one of the highest scaling amp chess pieces in the game, as well as giving you that nice little anti-heal, so you can still run Tindalos and also Glacials, so you don't have to worry about anti-heal. Persona is still in there because Persona is still really good for that just extra oomph from the percentage amp, and obviously Eclipse is just really good overall as to running Mount Slicer. Mount Slicer is still really good, so you don't have to really go immediately for a weapon upgrade, which is nice with Shoichi's daggers. His Mount Slicer is still one of his best daggers, giving him movement speed, cooldown, as just a good percentage amount of amp as well. Here are our blood. If you do get blood, your first transition is going to be Scarlet Dagger, but in case you didn't know, Scarlet Dagger is your BIS slot for your weapon. But this is going to be talking about the other slots. So for your chest piece, we're going to run Bikini. Bikini does have a nice little passive of Tranquility, giving you a nice shield if you're not in combat for a little bit, which helps with tanking a lot of damage, surprisingly enough, but don't rely on it too much. Other than that, its stats are really nice, giving us Omni Siphon, Amp, as well as a decent amount of defense. Next would be Opera Mask. Opera Mask is really strong this season, giving you Armor Pen, cooldown, as well as Omni Siphon and defense and Amp as well. Necronomicon is just a good chunk of Amp as well as anti-heal. Rose Steps, I think, are slightly underrated, but are also weak at the same time, just because its stats doesn't really help it, but its passive is what is kind of carrying it a little bit. When you activate your ultimate, it gives you 12% armor pen, which is nice, but I don't really see that much use in it, especially over Red Shoes, which Red Shoes is always going to be really strong on any character, especially Shoichi. Shoichi really loves that attack speed, helping you get your autos out more, as well as the lifesteal and anti-heal that it provides as well. And we have finally made it to the end. This is a pretty long video, honestly, and it took me a very long time to make. I really appreciate you guys watching to the end, and I hope this helps you new Shoichi players, or maybe old-time Shoichi players, kind of learn a couple things, or show you how to play the character a little bit better than you normally would. I do have a few extra things I want to say for the end, and I do have a little bit of a surprise for everyone who stick to the end. But first, I do want to say a big thanks to Bunrose. She is my thumbnail artist. I have commissioned her for a couple of things, but I never really had the time to finish those videos. So I just want to give her a huge shout out. Thank you for kind of putting up with me and making my art even when you're sick. But now I want to give you guys a small little gift. For those who you don't know, ECUN, he is a old time Shoichi player, pretty much the GOAT of Shoichi player, and he's the main person who made me start content creation as well as playing Shoichi, and I thought it'd be nice to have him say one final message for you guys.
Hi Assassin and viewers, it's ECUN. Long time no see. So I heard Assassin was making a Shoichi video, and he was kind enough to reach out to me and give me this opportunity to say hi to everyone. So I'm not here to tell you how to play this character. I'm sure Assassin's already done the job here, but if I were to tell you anything, it's that this character, I think, is the crown jewel of the game called Eternal Return. It's very easy to visually misunderstand that this character is similar to other assassin characters in other certain games, but you just know that's just not true. The simple objective of picking up daggers on the ground, yet the endless creativity given with that simple objective is what drives the whole story, and the amount of satisfaction you get once you're creativity yields results, I think it's unparalleled to any other characters in the game. I would be lying if I say it won't be a challenge, but I can promise it will be the challenge worthwhile. So thank you, Assassin, for making this video, and I hope everyone takes away a lot from it.